The dust had settled into Fiona Davies's lungs so deep she sometimes wondered if she'd ever breathe clean air again. But hunger was a crueler master than any cough, and so she kept moving through the pre-dawn darkness of Petaluma, California. Her feet already aching before the sun had even thought about rising on another brutal day in the summer of 1882. She'd left the boarding house at 4 in the morning, having barely slept 3 hours after finishing her shift at the saloon where she scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled. Now she was headed to the bakery where she needed dough for 2 hours before the baker's wife arrived, earning just enough coins to buy yesterday's stale bread. After that, she'd work at the general store, stocking shelves and sweeping for another pittance, and then back to the saloon for the evening shift. 3 jobs, 7 days a week, and still she went to bed with her stomach growling. Still she wore the same 2 dresses she'd owned since leaving Ohio 3 years ago, the fabric so thin in places she had to be careful how she moved in the sunlight. The bakery was sweltering even at this early hour, the ovens already fired up by the baker, who barely acknowledged her presence as she tied on her apron and plunged her hands into the flour. Her shoulders protested as she worked the dough, the same motion repeated hundreds of times until her arms felt like they might fall off, but she didn't dare slow down. She'd seen what happened to girls who couldn't keep up. They got replaced within a day, and in a town like Petaluma where more people arrived every week looking for work, being replaced meant going hungry. When she finally stumbled out into the morning light, the coins heavy in her pocket felt like both a blessing and an insult. She'd worked herself nearly to collapse and earned barely enough to buy a meal. The general store was her next stop, and Mr. Peterson was already in a foul mood when she arrived, barking orders about a shipment that needed to be unpacked and sorted before the store opened. Fiona's hands were still covered in flour dust that wouldn't quite wash away, and now they'd be covered in the grime of crates and boxes. She was in the back room, struggling to lift a particularly heavy crate of canned goods, when she heard the bell above the front door chime. Male voices drifted back to her, one belonging to Mr. Peterson and the other unfamiliar, deep and smooth with an accent she couldn't quite place. Something about it made her pause, made her aware of how she must look with her hair falling out of its pins and her dress stained with sweat and flour. "Need help with that?" Fiona nearly dropped the crate. She spun around to find a man standing in the doorway of the storeroom, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorframe and a presence that seemed to take up all the available air. His hat was pushed back slightly, revealing dark hair and eyes that were studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He was dressed like a working cowboy, but his clothes were well made, his boots expensive, and there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of authority. "I can manage," Fiona said, though they both knew it was a lie. The crate was too heavy for her, and her arms were already shaking from the effort. The man stepped forward anyway, and before she could protest, he'd lifted the crate as if it weighed nothing at all. "Where do you want it?" She pointed to the shelf, too tired to argue, and watched as he set it down with ease. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. He was looking at her with something like concern, his gaze taking in her worn dress, her flour-dusted hands, the circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep would ever erase. "Thank you," she managed, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "You work here?" "Yes, sir. And at the bakery." "I saw you coming out of there earlier." Fiona felt her cheeks heat. She didn't like being observed, didn't like the vulnerability of someone knowing just how desperate her situation was. "I work where I can." "How many jobs you got?" She considered lying, but what was the point? 3. The bakery here and the saloon in the evenings. Something flickered across his face, an emotion she couldn't quite read. That's too many. It's what it takes to eat, sir. He was quiet for a moment, still looking at her with that intense gaze. Then he said, I'm looking to hire someone to help manage my ranch. It's about 5 miles outside of town. The work would be hard, but not as hard as 3 jobs, and I'd pay triple what you're making now. Fiona stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Triple, that's right. I need someone who can handle the books, manage supplies, help coordinate the hands. Someone organized and willing to work. From what I just saw, you fit the bill. You don't know anything about me. I know you're working yourself to death for pennies. I know you lifted that crate even though it was too heavy because you're too proud to admit you need help. And I know Peterson back there is paying you half what he should because he can get away with it. He paused. Name's Tobias Xavier. I own the X Ranch, biggest cattle operation in Sonoma County. The name meant something. Even Fiona, who barely had time to hear the local gossip, knew about the X Ranch. Tobias Xavier was relatively new to the area, having bought the land just 2 years prior, but he'd built it up fast, earning a reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle. Some folks were suspicious of his success, whispered that no one made money that fast without cutting corners, but she'd never heard anything concrete. Why would you offer this to a stranger? Fiona asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. She'd learned the hard way that offers too good to be true usually were. Because I've been through 4 managers in the last year, all men who thought they knew better than me and spent more time drinking than working. I'm tired of it. I figure a woman who's desperate enough to work 3 jobs just to eat will appreciate steady employment and won't waste my time or money. It was blunt, almost insulting in its honesty, but Fiona found herself appreciating it more than any flowery speech. He was right about her being desperate. She was so tired. She sometimes fantasized about just lying down in the street and never getting up. The thought of working just 1 job, of earning enough to actually save money, of maybe even having a room of her own instead of sharing a boarding house with 6 other women, was almost too much to hope for. I'd need to live out there, she said slowly. Can't make the ride twice a day. There's a cabin, small but it's yours, meals included. When would I start? Today if you want, right now. Fiona looked down at her flour-covered hands, thought about the evening shift she was supposed to work at the saloon, about Mr. Peterson's scowling face and the baker's wife, who criticized every batch of bread. She thought about her aching feet and empty stomach and the bone-deep exhaustion that had become her constant companion. I need to collect my things from the boarding house and tell my employers I'm leaving. Tobias nodded. I'll wait. And Miss, he paused, realizing he didn't know her name. Fiona Davies. Miss Davies, you tell Peterson and the others whatever you want, but you don't owe them anything. They've been taking advantage of you, and we both know it. 20 minutes later, Fiona was sitting beside Tobias Xavier on his wagon, her few possessions bundled in a cloth beside her. Mr. Peterson had been furious, the baker less so, and she hadn't bothered to tell the saloon at all. Let them figure it out when she didn't show up. Tobias had been right. She didn't owe them anything. The ride out to the ranch was quiet at first. Fiona was too nervous to make conversation, and Tobias seemed content with silence. The landscape rolled past them, golden hills dotted with oak trees, the morning sun burning off the last of the fog. It was beautiful in a harsh way, this California country, so different from the green farmland of Ohio she'd left behind. You got family back east? Tobias asked eventually. Had. Parents died of fever 5 years ago. That's why I came west. Thought there might be opportunities here. Any brothers or sisters? A brother. He died in a mining accident in Nevada 2 years back, was trying to strike it rich. She said it flatly, without emotion, because if she let herself feel it, she'd never stop crying. I'm sorry. Life's hard. People die. That's just how it is. Tobias glanced at her. You're young to be so cynical. I'm 23, old enough to know how the world works. 23 isn't old. Feels like it some days. They fell back into silence. Fiona studied him from the corner of her eye, trying to figure him out. He couldn't be much older than 30, she guessed, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd lived a full life. His hands on the reins were steady and scarred, the hands of a working man, but there was something refined about him too, something that suggested education and breeding. You're not from California originally, she said. Texas. Grew up on a ranch down near San Antonio. Came out here looking for new opportunities, same as you. Must have found them, had some luck. Bought land at the right time, made some good deals. The cattle market's been strong. He said it simply, without boasting, which somehow made it more impressive. The ex-ranch appeared on the horizon like something out of a dream. The main house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Beyond it, Fiona could see the bunkhouse, the barn, several corrals filled with horses, and in the distance, cattle grazing on the hillsides. It was bigger than she'd imagined, more prosperous, and for a moment her courage faltered. What business did she have managing a place like this? Tobias must have sensed her hesitation because he said, "Don't let it intimidate you. It's just a ranch, and you'll be fine. You're tougher than the last 4 managers combined, I can already tell." He pulled the wagon up in front of a small cabin set apart from the other buildings. It was simple but well built, with a stone chimney and real glass windows. To Fiona, who'd been sharing a room with 6 other women, it looked like a palace. "This is yours," Tobias said, climbing down and helping her from the wagon. His hands were warm and strong, and she felt a strange flutter in her stomach that she firmly ignored. This was business, nothing more. "Get yourself settled. I'll send someone up with lunch, and then this afternoon I'll show you around, introduce you to the hands, go over what I need you to do." Fiona nodded, clutching her bundle of possessions. "Mr. Xavier, why are you really doing this?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I remember what it's like to be desperate, and because I think you'll do good work. That enough of an answer?" "Yes, sir, and Miss Davies." "Stop calling me sir. It's Tobias, or Xavier if you're feeling formal. We're going to be working together every day. Might as well dispense with the formalities." The cabin was better than anything Fiona had dared hope for. There was a real bed with a straw mattress, a table and 2 chairs, a wood stove for cooking, and shelves built into the walls. Someone had even left fresh linens and a quilt. She set her bundle down and just stood there for a moment, overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. This morning she'd woken up exhausted and hopeless. Now she had a home, a real job, and the promise of enough money to actually live on. She didn't let herself cry, though she wanted to. Instead, she unpacked her meager possessions, changed into her slightly less worn dress, and tried to make herself presentable. When the knock came on her door an hour later, she opened it to find a middle-aged Mexican woman with kind eyes and a basket of food. "I'm Rosa," the woman said in accented English. "I cook for the ranch. Mr. Xavier said to bring you lunch." "Thank you," Fiona said, taking the basket. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat made her mouth water. Rosa studied her with frank curiosity. "You're the new manager." "I suppose I am. The last one was a drunk. The one before that was a thief. You seem better already," she smiled. "Mr. Xavier is a good man, fair. You work hard for him, he'll take care of you." After Rosa left, Fiona ate slowly, savoring every bite. Real meat, fresh bread, vegetables, even a slice of apple pie. It was more food than she usually ate in 2 days, and it was just lunch. When she was finished, she washed her face and hands, pinned her hair back more securely, and waited for Tobias to return. The afternoon was a whirlwind. Tobias showed her the ranch office, a small room off the main house filled with ledgers, receipts, supply lists, and paperwork in various states of organization. Or rather, disorganization. It was clear why he needed help. "The books haven't been properly kept in months," Tobias admitted, looking embarrassed. "I've been trying to do it myself, but I don't have the head for it, and I'm too busy managing the actual cattle operation." Fiona flipped through one of the ledgers, noting the sloppy handwriting and inconsistent entries. "This is a mess." "I know. Think you can fix it?" She looked up at him, saw the hope in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. He was trusting her with this, trusting her with his livelihood, and he barely knew her. "Yes, it'll take time, but yes. Take all the time you need, just get it right." They spent the next hour going over the basics. The ranch had 20 cowhands, plus Rosa and her husband Manuel, who managed the household and the horses. They ran about 3,000 head of cattle, with regular drives to San Francisco and Sacramento. There were ongoing expenses for feed, equipment, wages, and maintenance. Income came from cattle sales, some horse trading, and occasionally hiring out hands to neighboring ranches. "I need to know where we stand financially at any given time," Tobias explained. "Need to know if we can afford new equipment, if we need to sell more cattle, if the hands are getting paid on time. The last manager kept telling me everything was fine, and then I found out he'd been skimming off the top for months. You report him to the law. Didn't see the point. Just ran him off. But it means I'm behind on everything, and I don't like not knowing where my own money is." After the office tour, Tobias introduced her to the hands. They were a mixed group, some young, some old, white and Mexican, and even a Chinese man named Lee who'd come over to work the railroads and ended up preferring ranch work. They all looked at Fiona with varying degrees of skepticism, but none of them were openly hostile. She suspected Tobias had said something to them beforehand. "This is Miss Davies," Tobias told them. "She'll be managing the books and supplies. You need something, you go through her. You have a problem, you take it to her first. She speaks with my authority. We clear." There were nods and murmurs of agreement. Fiona stood up straight, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. These were hard men who'd probably worked ranches all their lives. Why would they listen to her? But as the days turned into weeks, Fiona found her rhythm. She was good with numbers, always had been, and the ledgers started to make sense once she dug into them. She created new systems for tracking expenses and income, made sure the hands got paid on time, coordinated supply orders with the general store in town, and gradually brought order to the chaos. Tobias checked in with her daily, sometimes more than once, and she found herself looking forward to those meetings. He was different from any man she'd ever known. He listened when she talked, really listened, and he trusted her judgment. When she suggested they could save money by buying certain supplies in bulk directly from Sacramento, he didn't question her. He just told her to do it. When she pointed out that one of the hands was consistently claiming more overtime than he'd actually worked, Tobias dealt with it immediately. "You've got a sharp eye," he told her one evening as they went over the books together. They'd fallen into a habit of doing the weekly review after dinner, sitting in the ranch office with the lamp burning low and the crickets singing outside. Just paying attention. That's all. That's more than the last 4 managers did. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You settling in all right, the cabin comfortable enough. It's perfect, more than I expected. Good. "You're doing excellent work, Fiona, better than I hoped." The use of her first name sent a little thrill through her that she tried to ignore. At some point over the past few weeks, they dropped the formalities entirely. He was Tobias, she was Fiona, and they worked together with an ease that surprised them both. "I'm just doing my job." "You're doing more than that. The hands respect you. Rosa says the supplies are better organized than they've been in years, and for the first time since I started this ranch, I actually know where my money is." He smiled, and she felt her heart skip. "I made a good decision hiring you. You took a chance on a stranger. Best gamble I ever made." The moment stretched between them, something unspoken hovering in the air. Fiona looked away first, focusing on the ledger in front of her. This was her employer. She couldn't afford to think of him as anything else. She'd finally found stability, a good job, a place where she could breathe. She wouldn't risk it by developing feelings that had no future. But it was getting harder to ignore the way her pulse quickened when he walked into a room, or the way she found excuses to stay late in the office when she knew he'd be there. It was getting harder to ignore the way he looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious and unexpected. Summer faded into fall, and the ranch grew busier as they prepared for the big cattle drive to San Francisco. Tobias would be going with the hands, a trip that would take nearly 2 weeks, and Fiona found herself dreading his absence more than she wanted to admit. The night before he left, he came to her cabin. It was late, past the time when any employer should be visiting, but Fiona let him in without hesitation. He looked tired, dust still clinging to his clothes from a long day in the saddle. "Just wanted to go over a few things before I leave," he said. But they both knew it was an excuse. They sat at her small table, talking about the ranch, about what needed to be done while he was gone, about 100 inconsequential things. And then, in a pause in the conversation, Tobias reached across the table and took her hand. Fiona, her name, nothing more, but the way he said it made her breath catch. She looked up and found him watching her with an intensity that made her skin flush. "This isn't appropriate," she whispered, but she didn't pull her hand away. "I know, I'm your employer, you work for me. I shouldn't be here, shouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling." He ran his thumb across her knuckles, the gesture unbearably tender. "But I can't stop thinking about you. Haven't been able to since the day I met you in that storeroom, looking fierce and exhausted and too damn proud to ask for help. Tobias, tell me I'm alone in this. Tell me you don't feel anything, and I'll walk out of here right now. I'll keep this strictly professional and we'll never speak of it again." Fiona knew she should do exactly that, should protect herself, protect the good things she had here, but she'd never been good at lying, especially to herself. "You're not alone in it," she admitted quietly. "I feel it too." He stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her gently to her feet. For a moment they just stood there, facing each other in the lamplight of her small cabin. Then Tobias cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I'm going to kiss you now, if you'll let me." She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them testing unfamiliar waters. But then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and hungry, weeks of denied attraction finally finding release. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tobias rested his forehead against hers. "Come with me to San Francisco." "What?" "Come with me on the drive. I know it's not conventional and the hands will talk, but I don't care. I don't want to be away from you for 2 weeks. Tobias, I can't just leave. There's work to do here. Rosa can handle it. She's been running things longer than either of us. Please, Fiona, I want you with me." It was crazy, reckless, everything she'd trained herself not to be. But looking into his eyes, feeling the solid warmth of him, Fiona found herself nodding. "All right. Yes, I'll come." The cattle drive was hard work, harder than anything Fiona had done even in her days of juggling 3 jobs. They left before dawn, 24 cowhands and 3,000 head of cattle, moving slowly northwest toward San Francisco. Fiona rode beside Tobias at the front, grateful for the horse-riding lessons he'd insisted on giving her over the past few weeks. The first day was the worst. Her legs ached, her back ached, even her hair seemed to ache from being under the sun all day. But Tobias was patient, checking on her frequently, making sure she had water and food, pointing out landmarks and teaching her about the cattle business. At night, they made camp under the stars. The hands kept a respectful distance, setting up Fiona's tent well away from the main camp, but she could feel their curious eyes. They knew something was happening between her and Tobias, even if neither of them had said anything explicit. On the third night, after everyone else had turned in, Tobias came to her tent. They sat outside by her small fire, talking quietly so as not to wake the others. "You doing all right?" he asked, his shoulder pressed against hers. "Better now. The first day I thought I might die," he laughed softly. "You're tougher than you think. Most people couldn't do what you're doing. Most people aren't crazy enough to try. Maybe. Or maybe most people just don't have the right motivation." He turned to look at her, his face serious in the firelight. "Fiona, I need to tell you something." Her heart started to race. "What?" "I'm in love with you. I know it's fast, I know we've only known each other a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're brilliant and strong and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Fiona felt tears prick her eyes. "Tobias, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that this isn't just attraction or convenience. I love you, Fiona Davies, and I want to marry you if you'll have me." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. I've been trying not to, trying to be sensible and protect myself, but I can't help it. I love you so much it scares me." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, his hands tangling in her hair. When they broke apart, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." Inside the box was a simple gold band set with a small diamond. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was beautiful, and Fiona felt her breath catch. "It was my mother's," Tobias said. "She died when I was young, but my father saved it for me, said I should give it to someone special, someone worthy of it. That's you, Fiona. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. They sat there by the fire, holding each other, making quiet plans for their future. "They'd get married when they returned to the ranch," Tobias said. "Nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony with the hands and Rosa and Manuel as witnesses. Fiona would move into the main house with him, and they'd run the ranch together as partners in every sense of the word." "I can't believe this is real," Fiona said, staring at the ring on her finger. "6 months ago, I was working 3 jobs just to afford bread. Now I'm engaged to you, riding across California on a cattle drive. It doesn't seem possible. Life can change fast when you take a chance. You took the chance on me." "We took a chance on each other," he corrected. "And look how well it turned out." The rest of the drive passed in a haze of happiness. They reached San Francisco without incident, sold the cattle for a good price, and spent 2 days in the city before heading back. Tobias took Fiona to a proper restaurant, bought her a new dress and riding boots, treated her like the queen she felt like. They walked along the waterfront, talked about their dreams, made love in their hotel room with a tenderness that left Fiona shaking. "I want to give you everything," Tobias said, holding her close afterward. I want to make up for all those years of struggle, all those early mornings and aching feet and empty stomachs. You already have. You gave me hope when I'd run out of it. You gave me a future. We'll build that future together. They were married on a sunny October morning, standing in front of the ranch house with the golden hills rolling out behind them. The local minister performed the ceremony, and all the hands attended, along with Rosa and Manuel and several neighbors from nearby ranches. Fiona wore a simple white dress that Rosa had helped her sew, and Tobias wore his best suit, his eyes never leaving her face. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Tobias kissed her with such joy that the gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause. It was perfect, exactly what Fiona had never dared to dream of. The first year of their marriage was an adjustment, learning to live together, learning each other's rhythms and moods. But they fit together well, complementing each other's strengths and weaknesses. Fiona continued to manage the books and supplies, but now she also helped with the broader ranch decisions. And Tobias valued her input on everything from which cattle to keep for breeding to whether they should expand into horse trading. The ranch prospered under their joint management. By the end of 1883, they'd increased their herd to 4,000 head and hired 10 more hands. They built a new barn and expanded the bunkhouse, improved the irrigation for the grazing land, and developed a reputation throughout Sonoma County for quality cattle and fair dealing. But the best moment came in the spring of 1884, when Fiona realized she was pregnant. She told Tobias one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. They talked about children, but always in abstract terms, someday in the future. For a moment, Tobias just stared at her. Then a smile spread across his face, so wide and bright it could have lit up the whole valley. Really? A baby? Really? Due in November, near as I can figure. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. We're having a baby. Oh God, Fiona, we're going to be parents. Are you happy? Happy, I'm ecstatic. Terrified, but ecstatic. He set her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. A baby, our baby. The pregnancy was difficult at times. Fiona was sick for the first few months, and the summer heat was brutal. But Tobias was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly asking if she was all right, if she needed anything, if she should be resting more. Rosa took over most of Fiona's physical work, insisting that the expectant mother should take it easy. I'm not an invalid, Fiona protested one afternoon, finding Tobias and Rosa in a whispered conference about her health. No, but you're carrying precious cargo, Tobias said, his hand resting on her rounded belly. Our son or daughter, let us take care of you for once. Their son was born on a cold November night after 12 hours of labor that had Tobias pacing the floor of the main house like a caged animal. Rosa and the midwife from town attended Fiona, sending Tobias out when his anxiety became more hindrance than help. When the baby's first cry finally rang out, Tobias burst back into the room, his face streaked with tears. It's a boy, the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant in Fiona's arms. Tobias knelt beside the bed, staring at his son with wonder. He's perfect. Fiona, he's absolutely perfect. The baby had a shock of dark hair and his father's strong features. Fiona felt a love so fierce it was almost painful, looking down at this tiny person she'd created. They named him Thomas, after Tobias's father, and he became the center of their world. Those first months were exhausting, filled with sleepless nights and constant worry. But they were also filled with joy, watching Thomas grow and change, seeing him smile for the first time, hearing his first laugh. Tobias was a devoted father, waking up for middle-of-the-night feedings even though he had to be up at dawn, rocking Thomas when he was fussy, singing him soft lullabies in Spanish that he'd learned from Rosa. "I never knew I could love someone this much," Tobias said one night, holding his sleeping son. "You and Thomas, you're everything to me." "We're a family," Fiona said, leaning against his shoulder. "A real family." The years flowed by like water, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. When he was 3, Fiona gave birth to a daughter they named Florence, a tiny thing with her mother's red gold hair and her father's dark eyes. 2 years after that came another son, Timothy, who was quieter than his siblings but equally beloved. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1890, the X Ranch was one of the most successful operations in Northern California, known for quality cattle and innovative practices. Tobias and Fiona had become pillars of the community, respected by their neighbors and adored by their employees. Several of the original hands had married and brought their families to live on the ranch, creating a small community of their own. Fiona sometimes thought back to that morning in Petaluma, when she'd been trudging through the darkness to her third job, exhausted and hopeless. It felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to a different person. In a way, it had. That desperate girl had been transformed by love and opportunity into someone confident and strong. A woman who managed a successful ranch and raised 3 beautiful children. A woman who was genuinely happy. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills gold and purple, Tobias took her hand. They'd developed a tradition over the years of spending this quiet time together after the children were in bed, talking over the day's events or simply enjoying the peaceful silence. "Do you ever regret it?" Tobias asked. "Regret what?" "Saying yes that day. Coming out here with a stranger who made you wild promises." Fiona laughed. "Not for a single second. You changed my life, Tobias. Saved it, really." "We saved each other," he corrected, bringing her hand to his lips. "I was drowning in work and loneliness before you came along. You brought order to my chaos and light to my life." "That's very poetic for a cowboy." "I have my moments." He grinned at her, that same grin that still made her heart skip after all these years. "I love you, Fiona Xavier. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. I love you too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sound of children's laughter as Rosa read them a bedtime story. The cattle lowed softly in the distance, and somewhere a coyote called to the rising moon. It was perfect, this life they'd built together. Not without its challenges or sorrows, but fundamentally good, fundamentally right. Fiona thought about the girl she'd been, working 3 jobs just to eat, thinking that was all life had to offer. She thought about the cowboy who'd seen something in her worth saving, who'd offered her a chance when she'd run out of hope. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For finding me. For hiring me. For loving me." Tobias pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a crazy cowboy with a messy ranch and bigger dreams than sense. Best decision I ever made." As the years continued to pass, the Xavier family became legendary in Sonoma County. Thomas grew into a fine young man who took over much of the day-to-day ranch operations, having inherited his father's gift for cattle and his mother's head for business. Florence became a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch for the children of the hands and nearby families. Timothy discovered a talent for horse breeding, developing a line of excellent working horses that became sought after throughout California. Tobias and Fiona gradually stepped back from the daily grind, though they never fully retired. They were too invested in the ranch, too connected to the land and the life they'd built. Instead, they focused on their growing brood of grandchildren, spoiling them shamelessly, and passing on the stories of the ranch's early days. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Tobias took Fiona back to Petaluma. They rode into town on a fine spring morning, well-dressed and prosperous, barely recognizable as the desperate woman and the cowboy who'd first met in a storeroom all those years ago. The bakery was still there, though under new ownership. The general store had been expanded. The saloon where Fiona had scrubbed floors was now a respectable restaurant. They walked the streets hand in hand, Fiona pointing out the boarding house where she'd lived, the alley where she used to count her meager coins and wonder if she'd make it through another day. "I can't believe I was ever that person," she said, staring at the boarding house. "You're still that person," Tobias said. "Strong, determined, unwilling to give up even when things seemed hopeless. You've just got a better life now to show for it." They bought supplies they didn't really need from the general store, just for the symmetry of it. The store owner didn't recognize them, which was fine. They weren't here to show off or make a point. They were here to remember, to honor the journey that had brought them together. As they rode back to the ranch that evening, Fiona leaned against Tobias's shoulder, feeling content and blessed beyond measure. She thought about all the women still working multiple jobs just to survive, struggling the way she once had, and she said a silent prayer that they too might find their chance, their cowboy, their path to a better life. "What are you thinking about?" Tobias asked. "How lucky I am. How grateful." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You worked hard, you took risks, you deserved everything good that came your way." "We deserved it," she corrected. "All of this we built together." By the time they reached home, the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold. Their children and grandchildren were waiting on the porch, having planned a surprise anniversary dinner. There was music and laughter, good food and better company, the kind of warm family celebration that Fiona had once thought existed only in storybooks. Later, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Tobias and Fiona stood in their bedroom, the same room they'd shared for 20 years. Tobias helped her unbutton her dress, his fingers still as deft and gentle as they'd been on their wedding night. 20 years, he mused. Feels like yesterday and forever all at once. I know what you mean. Sometimes I look at you and still see that man who walked into the storeroom and offered me a job. Other times I look at you and see every year we've spent together, every moment we've shared. Here's to 20 more, Tobias said, pulling her close. And 20 after that, and as many as we're blessed with. You're assuming we'll live forever. With you, I just might. You keep me young, Fiona Xavier. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion that had never faded between them. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Fiona felt a peace so complete it brought tears to her eyes. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you more," Tobias whispered back, his arms tightening around her. "Impossible." "Want to bet?" She laughed softly, that quiet laugh he loved so much. "We could argue about this all night. I've got nowhere else to be." They talked until sleep finally claimed them. The easy conversation of two people who knew each other's hearts completely. And if Fiona dreamed that night, it was of golden hills and clear skies, of a ranch that stretched to the horizon, of children and grandchildren laughing in the sun, and of a cowboy who'd seen her worth when she'd forgotten it herself. The ranch continued to thrive under the family's stewardship. Thomas married a lovely woman named Sarah from a neighboring ranch, combining their properties into an even larger operation. Florence married the schoolteacher from town, a gentle man named Robert who fit seamlessly into the Xavier family. Timothy remained a bachelor, devoted to his horses and claiming he was married to his work. Fiona took great joy in her grandchildren, 9 in total by the time she turned 50. She taught them all to read and figure, the same skills that had saved her all those years ago. She told them stories about their grandfather's first cattle drive, about building the ranch from almost nothing, about the importance of hard work and seizing opportunities when they came. But she never told them about the darkest times, about working 3 jobs and going to bed hungry, about the bone-deep despair that had been her constant companion before Tobias. Those memories were private, tucked away in her heart as a reminder of how far she'd come and how much she had to be grateful for. Tobias remained robust and active well into his 60s, still riding out with the hands when they did the roundups, still making the final decisions on major ranch matters. But gradually, inevitably, age began to slow him down. A fall from a horse in his 67th year left him with a limp that never quite healed. His dark hair turned silver, and lines deepened around his eyes and mouth. Fiona didn't mind. She'd aged too, her red-gold hair fading to a softer color, her once smooth hands grown rough from years of work. But they'd aged together, their love deepening and maturing along with their bodies. If anything, she loved him more now than she had at 23. Now she knew him completely, knew his strengths and weaknesses, his dreams and fears, and loved every part of him. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by family and friends, a grand affair that brought together people from all over Sonoma County. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, more food than they could possibly eat. But the best moment came late in the evening, when Tobias pulled Fiona away from the crowd and led her out to the barn where it was quiet. "I wanted to give you this without an audience," he said, producing a velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a locket, gold and delicate, with their initials engraved on the front. When she opened it, she found a tiny photograph of them on their wedding day on one side, and a recent photograph of their entire family on the other. "Tobias, it's beautiful." "Not as beautiful as you," he said, fastening it around her neck. "I wanted you to have something that showed the journey from just the 2 of us to all of this. Everything we've built, everyone we've loved. It started with us, Fiona, with you saying yes to a stranger's crazy offer." "Best yes I ever said. Well, second best. What was the first? When you asked me to marry you." He kissed her then, sweet and lingering, the kiss of 2 people who'd spent a lifetime learning exactly how to love each other. When they broke apart, Fiona rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You remember what you said to me the night before our first cattle drive?" she asked. "I said a lot of things that night. You said life can change fast when you take a chance. That stayed with me all these years, because you were right. One chance, one decision to trust a stranger, and my entire life changed." "Our lives changed," Tobias corrected. "I was lost before you, just going through the motions. You gave me purpose, gave me a partner, gave me a family. I'm the one who should be grateful. We can both be grateful. Deal." They stood there in the quiet barn, holding each other, listening to the sounds of celebration drifting from the house. 30 years of marriage, of partnership, of love that had only grown stronger with time. It was more than either of them had dared hope for, more than they'd thought possible. The years continued their inexorable march forward. The turn of the century came and went, bringing with it new technologies and new challenges. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, though Tobias steadfastly refused to buy one, claiming a good horse was still superior. The railroad expanded, making it easier to ship cattle but also bringing more competition from other parts of the country. Through it all, the ex-ranch adapted and survived. Thomas proved himself a worthy heir, making smart decisions that kept the ranch profitable even as the cattle business became more complicated. The grandchildren grew into fine young adults, some staying on the ranch, others pursuing their own dreams in San Francisco and beyond. Fiona and Tobias settled into a peaceful old age, content to watch their legacy unfold. They spent their days in quiet pursuits, reading on the porch, tending a small garden, entertaining their great-grandchildren who began to arrive with increasing frequency. They moved more slowly, spoke more softly, but their love remained as vibrant and vital as ever. On a warm summer evening in 1912, 30 years after their first meeting, Tobias and Fiona sat on their favorite porch swing, watching another spectacular sunset. Tobias had been feeling poorly for a few weeks, and Fiona worried, though he brushed off her concerns with his usual optimism. "Fiona," he said softly, taking her hand. "Yes, love, if I could go back and do it all again, I wouldn't change a single thing. Every moment with you has been a gift. Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. I am fine. Better than fine. I've had a wonderful life, a life beyond my wildest dreams, and it's all because I walked into that storeroom and found you." He turned to look at her, his eyes still bright despite his failing health. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me you'll keep living, really living after I'm gone. I know it's years away yet, but when the time comes, don't shut yourself away. Keep working with the family, keep making the ranch better, keep finding joy. That's what I want for you." Tears streamed down Fiona's face. "Tobias Xavier, you're not allowed to leave me. Not planning on it anytime soon. But when I do, someday far in the future, I need to know you'll be all right. I won't be all right. You're my heart. And you're mine. That's why I know you'll survive. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met. You survived 3 jobs and poverty and heartbreak before you even met me. You'll survive losing me too when the time comes." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Fiona memorized every detail of this moment: the warmth of his hand in hers, the sound of his breathing, the solid presence of him beside her. She'd learned long ago that happiness was fleeting and precious, to be savored while it lasted, but Tobias proved more resilient than his fears. He rallied, regaining his strength over the following months. The health scare reminded them both that time was precious, and they made an effort to spend even more time together, to say the important things, to hold nothing back. They celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 4 generations of family. There were over 50 people present, all descendants or extended family of the union between a desperate woman and a cowboy with a kind heart. Fiona looked around at all those faces, all those lives that wouldn't exist if she hadn't taken a chance that day in Petaluma, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Tobias asked, his arm around her waist. "That I won at life." He laughed, that wonderful deep laugh she'd loved since the first time she heard it. "We both won, sweetheart. We both won." They lived to see the world change in ways they never could have imagined. The Great War came and went, taking Timothy with it, a loss that nearly broke them both. But they survived it together, holding each other through the grief, finding comfort in their children and grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, now one of the largest and most successful operations in California. The family name was synonymous with quality and integrity, a legacy that would outlive Fiona and Tobias both. In the summer of 1927, at the age of 68, Fiona fell ill with pneumonia. Tobias refused to leave her side, sitting by her bed day and night, holding her hand and telling her stories of their life together. Their children took turns keeping vigil, But it was Tobias she wanted, Tobias whose presence gave her peace. "I'm not afraid," she told him one evening, her voice weak but steady. "I've had a beautiful life, more than I ever dreamed possible." "You're not going anywhere," Tobias said fiercely. "I won't allow it. Even you can't boss death around, Cowboy." She managed a small smile. "But I'm not done yet. I still have things to do, grandchildren to spoil, great-grandchildren to meet." And somehow, miraculously, she pulled through. The doctors called it a testament to her strong will, but Tobias knew better. She'd survived because she was Fiona, because she was tough and stubborn and unwilling to give up. It was what he'd loved about her from the very beginning. Her recovery was slow but complete. By autumn, she was back on her feet, thinner and more fragile than before, but with her spirit intact. They celebrated quietly, just the two of them, grateful for the extra time they'd been given. "How many people get this?" Fiona mused, sitting on their porch wrapped in blankets while Tobias held her close. 45 years of marriage, a family that spans 4 generations, a life full of love and purpose. We're blessed, Tobias, truly blessed. I know. Every single day I thank God for leading me into that storeroom, for giving me the wisdom to recognize what I'd found when I saw you. A desperate woman covered in flour. No, a survivor, a fighter, the love of my life." They lived several more years together, peaceful years filled with small joys and quiet contentments. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1932, a golden milestone that few couples reached. By then, Tobias was 82, and Fiona was 73, both of them showing their age but still sharp of mind and warm of heart. The anniversary celebration was smaller than some of the previous ones, just immediate family, but no less meaningful. Their children stood and spoke about the example their parents had set, about the love that had sustained them through 50 years of marriage, about the legacy they were leaving behind. "To think it all started because Dad needed someone to organize his books," Thomas said, raising his glass in a toast. "Best hiring decision ever made." "Amen to that," Florence added. "You two showed us what real love looks like. Thank you for that." Tobias and Fiona held hands through all the speeches, occasionally exchanging glances that spoke volumes. They'd made it. Half a century together, and their love was as real and powerful as it had been that first night when Tobias had come to her cabin and confessed his feelings. Tobias Xavier died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1933 at the age of 83. Fiona woke to find him still beside her, his hand in hers, his face peaceful. She didn't cry at first. She just held him, memorizing every line and plane of his beloved face, grateful beyond words that they'd had so long together. The funeral was enormous, attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Tobias's kindness and integrity. But it was the private burial, just family, where Fiona finally broke down. They buried him on the ranch, on a hill overlooking the land he'd loved, and Fiona stood by the grave long after everyone else had gone, saying her private goodbyes. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me a life worth living. I'll carry you in my heart until we meet again." She kept her promise to him, the one she'd made all those years ago during his health scare. She didn't shut herself away in grief. Instead, she threw herself back into ranch work, helping Thomas with decisions, teaching the great-grandchildren, staying active and engaged with life. The grief was there, a constant ache in her chest, but so were the memories, precious and sustaining. Fiona lived another 10 years, long enough to see the ranch survive the Great Depression, long enough to meet several more great-great-grandchildren, long enough to know that the legacy she and Tobias had built would endure. She remained sharp and engaged until the very end, her mind full of stories and wisdom. She died in her sleep in the summer of 1943 at the age of 84, in the same bed where she'd spent 58 years of nights. They found her with a smile on her face, her hand resting on Tobias's pillow, the gold locket he'd given her still around her neck. They buried her beside Tobias on the hill, and if the grass grew a little greener there, if the wildflowers bloomed a little brighter, well, no one thought it was strange. Great love leaves its mark on the land, after all, and theirs had been a love for the ages. The X-Ranch continued under family management for generations, each new leader building on the foundation that Fiona and Tobias had laid. The story of how it all began became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of a woman working 3 jobs just to eat, and the cowboy who hired her and paid triple the wage, and how that single act of kindness and faith had blossomed into a love that changed both their lives forever. In the ranch house, prominently displayed, hung a photograph from their 50th anniversary. Tobias and Fiona stood together, old and weathered but still obviously in love, their hands intertwined, their eyes bright with joy. Below it, on a brass plaque, were inscribed the words Tobias had spoken to her so many years ago, words that had become the family motto. Life can change fast when you take a chance. And generations of their descendants looked at that photograph, at those words, and understood that they were the product of that chance, that leap of faith. They were the legacy of a desperate woman and a kind cowboy, of hard work and true love, of a partnership that had built an empire but, more importantly, had built a family. The sun still set golden over the California hills, painting the ranch land in shades of amber and bronze. Cattle still grazed on the grass that Tobias and Fiona had cultivated, and their descendants still walked the paths they'd walked, loved on the land they'd loved. And if sometimes, in the quiet of evening, someone claimed to see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old ranch house, holding hands and watching the sunset together, well, no one disputed it. Some love stories transcend death itself, enduring as long as memory lasts and the land remains. The story of Fiona Davies and Tobias Xavier was one of those stories, a testament to the power of a single choice, a single chance, a single moment of faith in another human being. From desperate poverty to enduring prosperity, from loneliness to a family that would span generations, from hopelessness to a love that would be remembered and celebrated for over a century, their journey was complete. And somewhere, on a hill overlooking golden California grassland, 2 souls rested together, their story told, their love immortalized, their legacy secure. They had taken a chance on each other, and from that chance had grown something rare and precious and enduring. They had loved completely, lived fully, and left behind a world made better by their presence in it. It was, in the end, everything either of them had ever wanted, and more than they'd ever dared to dream. The desperate woman and the cowboy had found each other against all odds, and together they'd built not just a ranch, but a testament to what love could accomplish when given the chance to grow. Their story ended not with sadness but with satisfaction, not with regret but with gratitude, not with questions but with peace. And that, truly, was the happiest ending of all.